whatsoever.
So how did you first get involved in exorcism?
My first study of that, I think, was for studying, what I say, from my early days before entering the craft, when I studied ritual magic. And I was very, very interested in magic of Abramelin the Mage, as it was known. I studied the works of Edric Shah. In fact, I studied a lot of the great masters there. And I think it was the Mage, actually, who led me into rituals that eventually started me as an exorcist. Although I'd like to clarify one thing. Although over the years I have gained a reputation as an exorcist, I only use exorcism as a very, very last resort. When I am called to a manifestation that outwardly, shall we say, outwardly is evil, I would much sooner try to communicate with the entity behind the manifestation and see if there's a resonatory, a reason behind it, and only if I found it is inherently evil will I then perform an exorcism. I find with a large percentage of cases that you're probably ending up with an earthbound spirit. Sometimes they don't even realize they're dead. They are not evil. They can be mischievous. They're not harmful. None of them are harmful. But if it is something inherently evil, which I have come across, then that is when it's like bell, book and candle time at full exorcism.
What's bell, book and candle then?
Oh, that's a Christian expression.
Right.
They used to go in with the Bible, a bell, and a candle, and cast the devil out. Right. And I mean, the number of times I can tell you over the years, Adrian, that I have been called in to clear up after Christians have gone in with bell, book and candle and failed, and then they say, well, send for Ralph.
Right, wow. So you're quite famous then among
No, not famous. Not famous, certainly not.
So,
well known, shall we say.
Well known, right, yeah. So can you remember your first exorcism that you performed?
No, to be quite honest, no, I don't. It's many years.
Well, a notable exorcism then.
A notable one. Strange enough, my most notable ones although I have travelled the length and breadth of England, I've done them abroad as well. My most notable one, strange enough, has been in Sussex. And there's one I used to call the Sussex Triangle, which spread from Lancing to Sompting to Shoreham. And some of the most notable ones all took place within that triangle. One of the worst ones I ever had, and was an amazing one, actually took place in Shoreham many years ago. Sompting one was a particularly evil one there, which is far too complex to go into. But if you like, I'll recount one too if you wish. I was living at home at the time, and I received a phone call, and I was not at all a happy bunny, being dragged out of bed about 2 o'clock in the morning from a gentleman who was known to me quite well, inasmuch as my son was working with him and was a lodger in his house. So I knew that if my son was there and this gentleman, Vernon his name was, Vernon had called me, then I knew that this was a genuine sort of poltergeist activity, as it seemed outwardly. And they said there things are happening around the house, things were being thrown around. And I said, okay, but I can't come immediately. I've got to prepare holy water. There's a number of things I have to do before I can come. And I said, but I will be there as quickly as I can. Now, when you're analysing psychic phenomena, of course, you can never rule out coincidence. But sometimes coincidence goes beyond the realms of possibility. And you have to say, there's got to be an occult or malign influence here. On this particular occasion, I jumped into my car, putting aboard ritual swords, remember, everything that is the paraphernalia, which is quite large with swords and stangs, which is like large staves, and off I went down, straight the way down to Hove Seafront. I got onto Hove Seafront, turned right, and bang, car just packed in, and my brake cable had snapped. Wow. I've never known a brake cable snap. Come drift if you like, but never snap. And I just drifted to the side of the road, and there I am stuck on this way to this exorcism. But fortunately, the seafront at home there's plenty of taxis backwards and forwards, and we didn't have mobile phones in those days. So anyway, along came a taxi, and I hailed him. He said, "What's wrong, mate?" I told him I was trying to get through to Shoreham. So we put all my apparatus into the car, and I've got some very strange looks from this taxi driver, and we set off. Well, we hadn't got a half a mile to the bottom of, I think it was Boundary Road. There was a public house there. Always remember it, called the Halfway House. And we got to the Halfway House, and bang, taxi came to a standstill and came to the side of the road and stopped. Got out, his cable, his brake cable had snapped. And no, sorry, I apologize, I'm wrong. Accelerator cable. The accelerator cable. It was my accelerator, not brake. Accelerator cable had snapped, and his accelerator cable snapped. By now, he is now a bit of a worried bunny himself. He said, "This is bloody unusual, to say the least." So anyway, he being on radio mics, he called up another taxi, and there was a bit of a hushed conversation. So I've got an oddball here, his accelerator cable snapped, and mine's bloody well snapped as well. Excuse me, swearing over the air.
Oh, this is Radio 4A. We can say anything on Radio 4A. We have total control of the airwaves.
And anyway, a long taxi came, and we put everything into his boot and loaded it into the back seat. And we were a bit quiet, and we went off. But we got outside of Shoreham to just a place called the Lighthouse. And just as we were approaching this the lighthouse, which is on the left-hand side, facing the sea at Shoreham, bang, his accelerator cable snapped.
Wow.
Now, 3 in a row, they now have got very, very superstitious. The next thing is now I'm unceremoniously dumped by the side of the road with all my apparatus. I still have a good mile and a half to go into Shoreham High Street, probably it's got 2 miles to go. And there I am, and this taxi is also stranded. Well, about 10 minutes later, another taxi comes along, hooks a tow rope up to the other taxi and takes him off. And I said, will you send another taxi for me? And he said, I don't think anybody will come out, mate. He said, the airways are humming about you. He said, I don't think you're going to get a taxi. And I said, well, no, it is my right as a taxi. He said, well, but nobody will come. So, being a busy thoroughfare, they went off. I was very, very unhappy over this. Taxis came, they slowed up. We've heard about you, and off the accelerator. Well, after a while, a taxi came down, tried to flag it again, and it slowed down. I said, oh, thank you. He said, I'm not picking you up. He said, I'm not picking you up. He said, we've got a fellow, he said, who's a taxi driver, Jehovah's Witness. And he's not afraid of anything. He says, he'll pick you up. Okay. So I said, thank you very much. So a few minutes later, along came this taxi with a man who I will never forget until my dying day. He was about 5 foot high, about 5 foot wide. He was the shortest, fattest little man I'd ever seen. Delightful fellow. And he said to me, he said, I do not want no trouble you have tonight, he said. But he said, if it is to do with the devil, he said, with God on my side and Christ as my Saviour, we will combat this together. So I said, thank you very much. I'll take all the help I can get on this one. So with that, we put everything into his taxi, and nothing further happened. Well, we pulled up with this road in Shoreham, and as I got out, I started unloading all of my stuff. This taxi driver jumped out of the cab, and he had the most enormous Bible I'd ever seen. It was one of these tomes with leather thing that was on the family, the great leather ones you've probably seen them, about 100 years old or more, great Victorian thing, all the births and deaths of the family, and he opens it at a certain section there. And he puts his hand on the dashboard, and he pulls out this enormous crucifix, which was, I always remember it was an ebony with silver edges to it, and a silver Christ on it. And this very, very large one, about a foot high, and this book cradled across his arm. He goes into the house, there's crowds of people in the street, everything, and there's thumbs and bang, and we're saying, what's going on in there? So along goes this priest. He goes there, I avouch you, I cast you out in the name of the Lord Jesus, etc. He goes, and there was one almighty smash. And a chest of drawers came straight down the stairs at him, hit the banister, split into 1,000 pieces. The last we saw of him was running up the path, opened the taxi door, threw the spike in, threw the shit across him, jumped it, and shot off like the very devil was after him, and we never saw him again. Wow. And we spent all that night on that exorcism and failed. Right. And we had to go round back there for 2 days in a row before we actually subdued it. Right. It was a very bad manifestation. Yeah.